Hello everyone, and welcome back to another book review. Whether it's films, novels, or shorts, a story is a story and worthy of contemplation like any other. Like the last two quote-unquote book reviews that I did, this one will not be of a whole book, but rather a segmented piece of one. The book in question is Isaac Asimov's Nightfall and Other Stories, so it's another collection of short stories. The mention of Asimov is nothing new to this channel. I glossed over his short The Last Question in my 50th episode of Thoughts, The Final Frontier. Just to give you guys a quick backstory of the writer, Isaac Asimov was born in January of 1920 in Soviet Russia until immigrating to America 8 years later, where he spent the rest of his days, dying in 1992 in Manhattan. He led a busy life, working as a professor of biochemistry at Boston University, while cementing himself as one of the most influential sci-fi writers of all time. So much so that he was considered one of the big three science fiction writers, along with Robert A. Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke. In his lifetime, he wrote and edited more than 500 books. Asimov was particularly renowned for his groundbreaking original concepts that have inspired countless future projects in all mediums of storytelling, from writing to television to film. Some notable examples are I, Robot, Bicentennial Man, Robots, The End of Eternity, the show Foundation, and our story in question, Nightfall, which has been made into a movie twice. While not his first piece, Nightfall was Asimov's breakout work at the age of 21. It was published in 1941 to great success and still considered to this day to be his greatest work. He himself, though, did not agree, reflecting on his work 27 years later in 1968 with a preface found in this book that I have. He thinks of Nightfall as just another piece of his arsenal. I will give my opinion on the matter at the end of the review. So, without further ado, let's get into a quick summary of the tale. The story starts with a tempestuous interview being given by a young hotshot journalist to an elderly astronomer in his place of work, a great observatory found on the edge of their city, Sauro, on the planet Lagash. In this story's universe, these people are not spacefarers once from Earth. This is just an alternate reality where we humans are situated on this particular other planet. However, as a side note, it could be argued that this is not the case, but that would just be a theory and has no immediate effect on this story retelling. So, the planet Lagash is one in perpetual sunlight. It has 6 suns that have been in the sky for the last 2,500 years. The journalist is probing the elderly astronomer about his recent publications that have drawn widespread controversy and ridicule from their society. The astronomer and his team have proposed that the recent wanings of these suns will in fact continue until they have all completely escaped them, leaving humanity in a great darkness. Then everyone will go mad. The journalist mocks the astronomer. Not so much at the sun's leaving, because he can't even conceive of that being a thing, but for the great darkness driving everyone mad. A religious cult exists in this world that has relentlessly promoted prophecies of this darkness. Then, according to them, it's followed by stars. The idea of stars are completely lost to these people due to them only experiencing day. They have no notion of other suns aside from theirs. As the journalist continues his interview, another individual, a psychologist, enters the room to share this last day with these scientists that revealed the truth to him. The astronomer leaves mid-conversation due to irritation and to perform preparations, so the psychologist takes over the interview, and turns out to be remarkably helpful at translating the astronomer's mathematical findings, using layman's terms to the journalist, and it ends up giving the young man a fright as the psychologist makes more and more sense. He performs an experiment with the journalist, taking him to a smaller room and asking him to draw the heavy curtains there. Throughout the whole endeavor, the journalist scoffs at the notion that darkness can bring about madness, until the room is blotched of all light. In the pitch blackness, the journalist grows quickly claustrophobic. It reveals to him just how fragile the human brain, however resilient, is with the concept of a great darkness. The remainder of the tale takes us through each person's emotional state as the final sun begins to be eclipsed by a mysterious rocky celestial body larger in diameter, covering the dim final sun's light completely. 3 subplots, or sub-stories, exist. One is of a cult member sneaking into the observatory to try and destroy the astronomer's telescope camera. The scientists were using it to take pictures with long exposure in an attempt to capture proof of other suns, so far away that they would be mere dots in the sky. The cultist believes that it will sully the star, so he attempts to wreck it somehow, but is caught in the act, failing. Other cult members form a mob outside, trying to get in and destroy the unholy machines. Based on their books of worship, the darkness has happened 5 other times, 25 years between each, and every time it has reset civilization except for a chosen few, presumably those not affected by the fear of claustrophobia, but they don't know that. And this time, to them, holds the most risk of ascension because of the scientists' instruments. They end up also being unsuccessful at stopping the astronomers from taking their pictures. Another subplot involves plans from the group of astronomers, made months ago to save humanity from the madness by constructing an underground bunker and filling it mostly with women and children. They ingeniously invent torches, which for this world has never been invented before due to them never needing it, and give them to the bunker members, as well as water, non-perishables, and files, texts full of science in hopes that humanity will not be doomed back to a primitive religious state after the suns rise again. So that is my specific summary of Nightfall. Of course, there are particulars that were simplified or missed out completely, but the gist is there. When going over this story, its main amazing takeaway for me is the idea of how our scientific method would work under alternative environmental conditions. One of the other scientists in the story theorizes to the journalist about how things on a different planet might be different. Like, if it only had 1 sun instead of 6, it would experience a great darkness rapidly, but every half day. Hey, what do you know? That scientist was right. But he laughs off his own theory as ridiculous before moving on. The astronomers end up guessing that the entire universe could have up to 24 other suns in it. That is, before they witness the truth for themselves. The final page of the story goes meta by explaining that, on Earth, the naked eye can see 3,600 stars, but for those living on Lagash, located in the center of a giant cluster, it bears the naked eye witness to over 30,000 stars. This story works double time by giving us so much information about its people and their history and current society and environment, while also keeping so much a mystery. Behind every aspect presented, there is so much to theorize about what isn't said. This is where the side note theory could come in. What if these people did originally come to this planet from Earth, and they went through regression, collapsing all collected knowledge every time they plunged into darkness? The story also works double time by working allegories into each aspect. Tales, faith, truth, science, society, collective regression, making mistakes, and fear. It is all woven in a way that allows whoever reading it to take something different away from it. I personally took away a great fascination regarding how the bulk of society often scoffs at the scientific method, how we cope with the oncoming disasters by denying its existence until it wreaks its devastation, and how we find ways to push through our own fears and impossible seeming odds to strive as best we can. Throughout all of what this tale does amazing, there are certain minute or grammatical aspects that show up to tell us that this tale has aged. When it comes to things like that, it's hard to blame the author. How could one from back then know where the future world would go and how to write a piece universal enough to last? It is the ultimate criticism one can give to older tales, which are almost all written by white males. There never seem to be any females as scientists, journalists, or anyone independent. And terms like retarded and moron are used interchangeably. These minor devalues or omissions of classes of people are also pretty ubiquitous in older nonfiction, such as psychological or philosophical texts. They always mention he or him when referring to a human being. When referring to a person, writers now either say they or switch between he, him in one sentence and she, her in another. Now, to bring us back to Nightfall, other than those grammatical critiques, some of the story's dialogue might not be the best, but When it does flow, such as when people are explaining ideas or riffing on theories, that is where it truly shines. All in all, my feelings after leaving this dystopian world and its people desperate at the end of their ropes is a feeling of awe at how captivating this whole experience was. To quote the story, "There's a fascination in being frightened when it's part of a game. A baby is born with 3 instinctive fears, of loud noises, of falling, and of the absence of light. That's why it's considered so funny to jump at someone and shout boo. That's why it's so fun to ride a roller coaster." And I completely agree with that, wanting to only add, and that's why it's so fun to be entrenched in a good spooky story. With all that said, I would say that this is certainly one of Asimov's greatest stories. It's certainly been brought up higher than others through simple popularity and by the fact that it was his breakout work. Those exterior factors play a big role. However, in my personal opinion, I would put Nightfall as my second favorite Asimov story, behind The Last Question. And so, to give them ratings, I'd give The Last Question a perfect 5 stars. And Nightfall a 4.5 out of 5. And that's the end of the video. I appreciate you being here, and would love to hear back from you. What's your opinion regarding Isaac Asimov's work? Have you seen the movies or shows based on his work? Have you read a ton of his stuff? Let me know. As always, I wish you nothing but love in your life, and ask you to remember to keep on thinking. Ciao for now. Peace.